Aloha and welcome to Ehana Kako, a weekly program on the ThinkTech Hawaii Broadcast Network. I'm Keli'i Akina, president of the Grassroots Institute. Well, you've probably just caught your breath from the 2014 election season, campaigning, voting, or maybe not voting if we take a look at the numbers of those who showed up or those who didn't show up. Today, we've got a wonderful opportunity to talk to somebody who really understands the political scene here in the state of Hawaii. But we're going to talk about a lot more than just the election. What does it mean to live in Hawaii? What is our dominant mode of thought, and what is our political system all about? And how does one live here, survive here, and make a difference as what we might call a conservative? Nobody is better equipped to answer this question than the lone Republican senator in Hawaii's State Legislature, Senator Sam Slom. He's sometimes been dubbed the loneliest senator in America, but that's really not true, he tells me, because he's got lots of friends. And hopefully, by the end of this broadcast, he'll be your friend too, if not already. Welcome to the program, Senator Sam Slom.
Aloha, Keli'i. Thank you for having me.
Well, delighted.
And I'm not lonely.
That's right.
I've told everybody before, I'm not lonely because I know why I'm down at the Capitol.
Absolutely.
I know what I'm doing. Now I'm going to be starting my fifth legislature by myself.
There you go.
But the nice thing about that is it didn't take long to organize the minority.
Well, of course, because
we had
you
a
get
couple.
to wear all
we had a
hats.
couple of knockdown, drag-out battles. Me and me and me. And then the nice thing is, whenever I make up my mind about something, I get 100%
There you go.
participation. So it's a good deal.
Very efficient. I just
very efficient.
Wonder how you feel sometimes sitting alone in the caucus room when the other caucus room is packed.
Well,
with
the nice thing about
Mhm.
that is, as you know, both the majority party and minority party
Yes.
caucus rooms are exactly the same
That's right.
size. So we don't have to put up with the 24 people and all their staff and everything else. So it's much more comfortable. You know.
Absolutely.
And I think that gives you an opportunity to think better, to be more relaxed. Because they don't think at all, unfortunately, in that caucus room. They get the rubber hoses out, they beat them into submission, and then they all walk out onto the floor, and they all say the same thing. And that's why most of the votes, as you know, during Senate sessions are 24-1.
There you go.
And if I weren't there, they would be 25-0.
At least you're the voice of conscience. Sam,
well, I try to be.
You've been observing Hawaii's political scene for how many decades now?
Well, I guess since I was a student at the University of Hawaii, because I majored in, they didn't call it poli-sci then.
Sure.
They called it government.
Oh, there you go.
And that's what I majored in. So I was very interested in candidates,
and
the process.
What was
and all
that decade?
Well, gee, we started in the 60s, right
60s,
after.
there you go.
Right after statehood. This was an exciting place.
Absolutely.
We were proud to be an American. We led the nation in voter turnout. We wanted new ideas, new people. And now today, 55 years later, that's all changed.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask
Yeah.
you about, because you've observed that entire period of time, the rise of the Democratic
I know
Party.
where the bodies are buried.
Oh,
Kaylee.
there you go. The rise of the unions,
Yep.
the rise of the political climate that exists today here in the state of Hawaii. How would you describe that? Later on, I'm going to ask you about this current election that we've just
Sure.
had, but let's lay some groundwork here.
Yeah.
If you were telling someone from out of state
Yep.
what goes on in Hawaii, what our mode of thinking is politically, what would you tell them?
Well, I would tell them that we are unique,
Mm-hmm.
that we have an entire unbroken history of authoritarian, total one-party control. We started at the monarchy.
That's right.
One party, authoritarian, where people went, to get things from the monarch. Then we had 50 years of sole Republican rule during the territorial days. And now for the last 60 years, we've had sole Democrat rule.
So your critique is not about party, whether the Democrats
right.
are in power or the
That's right.
Republicans are in power.
It's about the power itself, the power structure,
So
and
that
the
when
idea of monopoly.
anyone has total control, as they say, power corrupts, but absolute
Lord
power
Acton. Lord Acton was
corrupts
correct.
absolutely.
And it does. And as a matter of fact, that's why you see in elections, all of the action and all of the interest is between and among the Democrat candidates, among themselves. And then when the primary is over, then there's no interest whatsoever in the general, and there's very few Republican or loyal opposition
So
candidates.
your ideal Hawaii would not be Republican control.
No,
What would it
absolutely
be?
not. It would be a balanced control.
All right. Competition between the parties.
Gotta be. It's like competition
Mm-hmm.
in business. If you don't have competition, if you have one business, well, let's take, for example, I don't know, my least favorite monopoly, Hawaiian Electric
All
Company.
right.
Hawaiian Electric Company, highest rates in the country. Keep going higher.
Yes.
Come to the legislature. They have a lot of political clout. There's a revolving door between people that work for HECO and in the state legislature. Every time they have a cockamamie idea about more control and more, I guess, authoritarian rule over the distribution, they get paid. The ratepayers, the taxpayers have to pay. Even in this issue of solar, we all support solar, the idea of becoming independent, but the non-solar roof people subsidize the solar people. And then when Hawaiian Electric wants to build an undersea cable, a power cable, which has never been built anywhere in the world at the depths that we have now. We've had communications cables, but not that. For everything that they do, even if it doesn't go ahead, they get paid.
Yes.
The legislature pays them.
So in your
that's the problem.
And in your critique, this isn't so much about the party brand, but about power itself, because you could be talking about the Republicans and the big five corporations before the Democrats.
Yeah, everybody talks about being bipartisan.
Yes.
Well, I shouldn't say everybody. I should say mostly the Republicans. Democrats aren't talking about it. They want total control. But for the Republicans, nationally and locally, it's you got to get along. You got to work with the people and all that, which to the Democrats generally means bend down and vote for our programs. Well, the secret is, in the 18 years that I've been in the state Senate, even though I have a reputation for having more no votes than anybody else and speaking out, the fact of the matter is probably 90% of the issues I'll vote yes on.
Sure.
It's that 10% that I won't budge. Their principles, their values.
So there's a distinctive over here.
Absolutely.
So
absolutely.
let's take a look at the way the dominant party thinks about economy and the economy. What are some of the broad strokes that would describe their approach to the economy?
Back in the day, up to probably 5, but certainly 10 years ago, we had nationally and locally a group of Democrats that were referred to as Blue Dog Democrats.
All right, yes.
Many of them were business owners. They were certainly pro-business. They could be counted upon when you got into really heavy issues about more taxation or more regulations or minimum wage. You could count on them to come out and say, wait a minute, that's going to be harmful to business. And if it's harmful to business, it's going to be harmful to our economy. I think the last legitimate Blue Dog Democrat in the state of Hawaii was a man by the name of Ed Case.
Yes.
Who was out of step with the rest of the Democrats. Why? Because he was independent. Why? Because he would sometimes vote against them.
He even suggested, heaven forbid, reform of the Jones Act.
Absolutely he did. And he was involved in the early days of the sovereignty movement. Oh my God, they were going to lynch him. But I respected him, I admired him. As a matter of fact, I had him on my board of directors of Smart Business Hawaii because he was a good thinker. And you could depend upon him to stand up. Now what happens when I go onto the Senate floor and there's 24 of the majority party members, if I raise an issue that they're not prepared for or that they have to vote on, and Keli'i, in all this time, I've never played gotcha. In fact, when my research staff, which is a crack research staff,
indeed,
much better than all of the majority combined.
Some of them trained at an independent think tank.
Yeah, they did. It was called Grassroots. Yeah, that's right. Anyway, when they come up with something, I will go to the Senate President and the majority leader and say, look, this is a terrible bill. You know you're going to pass it. I'm going to vote against it. But you should be aware of this because it's flawed. Why don't you fix it? And you know what their answer is? Oh, we'll come back and do it next year. We'll tweak it next year. So they pass bad legislation. I find that hard to believe. But then, after I make a speech on the Senate floor or in Ways and Means Committee, I'll have one or more of my Democratic colleagues, they'll come up to me and go like this.
Yes.
And then they'll say, that was really a good speech. I didn't know that before. Thanks for bringing that up. And I said, well, why didn't you vote for it? We can't. And it's true. They can't. Because if they don't go along with the party line, they fear losing their office, their committee chairmanship, not getting bills passed, even having their per diem reduced to, my God, the level of a Republican, So, and that's a sad thing. We talk about transparency in government. We've got less transparency now than we did certainly 20 years ago, 10 years ago. In some cases, There's more opportunity for people to be empowered, but in most, no.
And is that directly related to the lack of a second party?
Absolutely. And that's why I say, if it were the Republicans, I would feel exactly the same way. And sorry to say, many of them would probably act the same way. You know that I have, from even before I was in elective office, I supported empowerment, initiative, referendum, recall, term limits. You think that I could get the existing Republican members in the House to support most or even some of those things? No. Their attitude, some of the attitudes are, particularly with term limits, we fought long and hard to get here. Now it's our turn. And it's not a question of turn. It's a question of what we do for the people. It's a question that, going back to George Washington, this should not be a career. This should not be, it's not my seat or your seat. It is the people's seat. And we should absolutely rotate. People say, well, we do have term limits. Every 2 years or 4 years you can vote for somebody. Well, good luck with that when 96% of incumbents, get reelected. We should have different kinds of people. Housewives, garbage collectors, people that have to run their own families or their small businesses, have to make the tough decisions, ones that they don't like and ones that are hard on their families, but they know how to make them. We don't do it in the legislature.
Once in a while there's a bright light, and there are people with whom you align, Democrats. Take Senator Kim, who in some of her stands for transparency. I remember you came out to a grassroots event. Both of you were on stage hosting, and you were singing her campaign song.
Sure. The reason I respect and admire her, and I've known her from the days that she was in the city council, and she's a Democrat, she stands up for things. And I'm sorry to say, Keli'i, if I were to give you a list of people in this community that really were willing to stand up for things, the list of women would be here and the list of men would be down here. And that's also true in the media, as you may be aware. And that's a sad thing. And I think that's one of the reasons she didn't prevail in the race for Congress, because sometimes people don't like, well, they don't like people that stand up, but they particularly don't like women. And women have taken much more an active role.
There you have it, folks. Sam Slom, the advocate for women.
I love women. I love strong women. Yes. That's what she's got on her door. Strong women equals strong America. And that's, when we would sit in hearings together, grown men would cry because they would come unprepared and think that they could, laugh their way through a hearing or something. She's one of the few state legislators, House or Senate, that will ask a question, and then they'll try to, schmooze their way through it.
Certainly.
And she'll go back to them and say, you haven't answered my question. Give me the answer to that. We need people that do that.
Absolutely.
I don't care their political party, and I don't care their background.
And there are a handful of others you've worked with very closely. And the reason I raise this is because I want to punctuate the fact that I have known about you, that it's not about party brand. It's about values. It's about issues. It's about standing on
and it's about consistency. I remember 2 years ago, right after the election before that, when the PLDC was a major issue here. It was a negative. I campaigned against it. I'm pro-development, but I was anti-PLDC. The way the government and certain developers got together, they waived the rules, they got special treatment and all that. When the debate came to the Senate floor, when the session had convened, the supporters were silent. They didn't say anything. And that's part of my problem. When an issue comes up, most of the times the majority party will call a recess, they'll go behind closed doors. The public is denied the benefit of what the argument is. I would like to see people stand up and say why they're for something or why they're opposed. I try to do that all the time because I think that's a right of the people. I was going to finish that statement about PLDC, though. Glenn Wakai, who doesn't get a lot of publicity, he's going to get more because he's going to be the Economic Development Chairman in 2015. But he stood up to defend the PLDC. And he did it in such a way which was very eloquent. Here, he knew he had a hostile audience and all that, but he did it anyway, and I congratulated him afterwards. We totally disagreed on the outcome and how we voted. But I respect that, for people to get up, not dramatically and not emotionally. And as you know, the problem with government, nationally and locally, is that emotion always trumps rationality, whether we're talking about the gun issue or the Jones Act or sovereignty or anything else. It's the emotional part of it. And it shouldn't be that way. We're lawmakers. We should look at the facts.
Very good.
We should argue the best way we can, then let the votes come down the way they will.
We're going to come back after a quick break with Senator Sam Slom, and there are a couple of questions I'm going to ask him. First, now that we've talked a little bit about the way of thinking in Hawaii's political climate, I want to ask him, what can we expect in the post-Inouye, post-Abercrombie, if you will, era, in terms of what goes on in our state politically? And then I also want to ask him what makes a conservative a distinctive voice. This is Keli'i Akina with the Grassroots Institute. We're on ThinkTech Hawaii's E Hana Kako with Senator Sam Slom. Don't go away.
Hi, I'm Ethan Allen. I'm the host of Likeable Science on ThinkTech Hawaii. We talk about why people should like science, why science is actually fun, how science is a dynamic and vital part of everyone's life, why everyone, every man, woman, and child on the planet should really know science, should love science, should be familiar with science. So it's a great show. People come on here and have interesting conversations with us. They tell us why they do what they do, why they love it, why we should love it too. I hope you'll join us every Friday, 1 to 2 p.m. And of course, you can see it anytime on YouTube. Aloha.
Aloha and welcome back to E Hana Kako. I'm sure that my guest today, Senator Slom, agrees with that saying. It's based upon a venerable saying here in Hawaii. We all together say E Pule Kako. Let's pray together. That's said over and over, whether the setting is a secular one or a religious one. Well, E Hana Kako is let's work together. And hopefully we're praying and we're working, but that's the spirit of what we want to accomplish at the Grassroots Institute. Let's unite people around good ideas for good results in the state of Hawaii.
Yeah, but wait a minute.
Yes,
you're not allowed to pray together
in
the state Senate. They
That's right.
disbanded that 6 years ago.
But they allowed Sam Slom to pray.
Well, I have a very important mission in the Senate floor.
There we go.
I'm at the very end of the program, and when there's a motion made to adjourn, I stand up and say, I second that motion.
There we go.
But
That's like amen.
Yeah, well, no, what I've done for 6 years, before I say I second the motion, I deliver my own prayer. And I mention God, because I think it's really presumptuous of anybody, but particularly a legislative body, and particularly in these terms, when we think we're smart enough, we know it all, and we can't go to a divine deity. It's not who you go to. You can go to anybody you want. Or in days past, when we started the session with a prayer, there were some individuals that didn't want to be on the Senate floor, and they had that choice. They didn't do it.
Well, the bottom line is whether we think we ourselves, our government, is the ultimate power, or whether we're accountable to something greater than ourselves. Sam, post-Inouye era, and I hesitate to say post-Abercrombie era. It's not an era yet.
And I don't think it will be. It won't be an era.
And
it'll be a footnote in time.
Absolutely, and what a massive loss, of historic dimensions.
Of Dan and Noah.
Yeah. Well, no, loss at the polls for Abercrombie.
Yeah. See, I wasn't surprised. I wasn't surprised for a number of reasons. First of all, I've known Neil Abercrombie since we were both students on the campus of the University of Hawaii. Although he's older than me, he's shorter than me, I'm better looking, and I have more hair. But we go back to the days, actually, to Vietnam days when I was with the conservative group Young Americans for Freedom. And we supported American troops.
You had different haircuts back then from each other.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But I mean, he was there with the SDS, the Students of Democratic Society.
And you created another group here in Hawaii.
Well, I didn't create it, but I was the president of Young Americans for Freedom, which had been started by Bill Buckley.
There you go.
In Sharon, Connecticut. The differences then and now are still very telling, and. As I said, I've known David Ige for 30 years. The fact that he's an engineer and not a community organizer is a real plus. I served under him when he was education chair, when he was health chair, and most recently Ways and Means. And he was very thoughtful. This is very fair to me. We had a lot of discussions and a lot of debates in that Ways and Means committee particularly. So I'm hoping he will do well. The problem I have is that he is independent to a certain extent, but how independent can you be of the majority party?
Sure.
Right? And of the philosophy that has basically turned Hawaii into an entitlement society.
Now, that takes me back to the question I wanted to ask you.
Sure.
What can we expect in the post-Inouye era? More of the same, or transition and change?
Here's the thing.
Yes.
You know, and I know, and my background really is consulting economist. That's what I am, and an entrepreneur. Everything is cyclical. And that old pendulum swings back and forth. Well, the pendulum right now is stopped in Hawaii. You know, people are arguing about sovereignty. I made a statement I wrote in my weekly blog right after the election. Well, we do have sovereignty in Hawaii because
absolutely.
we were absolutely different from the other 49 states and America in every way. But the pendulum started swinging back. Dan Inouye was one of a kind. Republicans would go to Dan Inouye if they needed something because he was the go-to guy. He had the clout. He had the seniority. I don't think being in office for 55 years is really a great thing. Apparently, it is more so in Hawaii. And there are some examples in other states close to that. But he could deliver. The problem was when he became head of the Appropriations Committee, everybody thought, now it's going to be even better. We'll get everything we want. Well, the problem is there were 49 other states, and they expected things from him too. So he was gradually losing the ability to bring as much as he did, although from an economic standpoint, Dan Inouye was the second most important economic driver in the state of Hawaii.
And it's worth noting, you mentioned sovereignty.
Yeah.
Dan Inouye was unable to deliver the Akaka bill.
That's correct. That's correct. And had he not been in favor of the rail transit, the steel fixed rail transit, it wouldn't have gotten as far as it has gotten. And I still maintain, and you know, I was a plaintiff against it, but I still maintain that project will not be built in downtown Honolulu.
So it's not that Dan Inouye was without power, incredible power.
Yep.
You're suggesting that it's not as great as we might have thought it to
Well,
be.
it was being diminished, that's true, but it still was great. The thing with Dan Inouye, though, he was independent. Remember, he and Akaka split on the Alaskan pipeline and things like that. You could absolutely count on him for veterans issues and America's defense. And that was something to look up to. And I mean, he was, you know, he accomplished so many things. The crop of our congressional delegation right now, in my humble opinion, should be plowed under, fertilized, and started over.
And that's a compliment you're
And that's
giving.
a compliment, yeah.
But, you know, going back to Inouye,
Yeah.
Probably the biggest issue that the news is talking about, the Democrats are talking about, is the potential impending loss of federal funding, because there is this tremendous dependence upon federal funding for whether it's the rail or education
exactly right.
or the military, the economy, and so forth. What do you see in terms of federal funding? Do you think the loss of Dan Inouye is going to be a huge impact to us?
Absolutely, huge impact. Because like I said, the folks that we have now, they're in no position to do anything for us. And they won't be taken seriously. And other states have other concerns. Now,
but is that so bad, the loss of federal funding?
I don't think so. You and I agree on that. I mean, it's, you know, state funds come out of one pocket, the federal funds come out of the other pocket. We're still paying for all of it. And hey, we're talking about now nearly an $18 trillion deficit.
Well, it's not so bad if our state will wake up and use it as a motivator.
Here's the thing. You know, I've been saying now for a couple of years that we were headed for insolvency, financial insolvency.
Yes.
Grassroots sponsored a meeting.
A forum on this, yes,
Right,
and a white paper.
With the budget director, Calvert Young, who I have admired from the day I met him 4 years ago. He was the only Abercrombie staffer, cabinet level guy to stay through the whole 4 years. That gives him some credit in the first place.
Ironically, he was in some ways one of the more critical.
He was independent. He never spun anything. He never stonewalled anything or gave a wrong answer, and yet he still supported, you know, his boss and the administration.
And he affirmed your own analysis that basically within 2 years we're financially sunk.
2016, there will be no more cash in the state of Hawaii. Now, a state cannot go bankrupt.
Right.
A city, a county can, but not a state.
And we can't call that bankruptcy.
We can't call it bankruptcy, and basically then the state has two options. One is to severely cut back on spending and debt, borrowing, which the majority party, nationally and locally, they don't know how to do that. They don't want to do that. Secondarily, then, we're looking at taxes and increased fees. So It's going to be an interesting year, and as I say, David Ige has shown restraint before, and he understands these things. I think that's a good thing. So I don't think all those people that think that they're going to get something in 2015 are going to get it, because it's a budget year, and we're already up to, you know, $24 billion plus $26 billion of unfunded liability.
So we've got nearly $50 billion.
More than that,
you
got the train. You got the train to nowhere. Where's
That's right.
We've got a population of 1.3 million. We can't sustain it. And of that 1.3 million, nearly 40% are on some form of welfare now, the entitlement state.
Well,
so we didn't have that before.
Right.
And the Oriental persuasion and background is one of fiscal conservancy. But the problem is, since so many people are working for government, state government, county government, when somebody can figure out, or we explain to them what the economic realities are, they get it. But then they say, oh, wait a minute, Uncle Kimo is working for the state, Auntie Leilani is working for the county. And they're afraid that if they take a different position, it's going to interrupt that, not only for that breadwinner, but also for them, because they're benefiting from it too. So when we run out of money, or run out of the ability to say yes, 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 then you're going to start to see major changes in this state. Not until, but it's going to happen. The severity is debatable, but it's going to happen, and then you've got all of these nonprofits and special interest groups that are going to have to fend for themselves.
This, of course, then, leads us to the question, what do you, and what do other conservatives, for lack of a better word, have to offer this state? What is the distinctive thinking?
You know, the first speech I ever made after I was elected, the 1997 Senate, I stood up, and there were two of us then, and we went all the way to 5. We had 5 Republicans. I said to my colleagues, look, I don't know how you're going to vote on certain issues. I see it as my responsibility to present the facts and the unintended consequences to you. But in any case, I guarantee that years from now, you won't have the luxury, as in the past, of standing up and saying, oh, is that what that meant? Is that what that meant? So I see my role as twofold, or the role of conservatives or Republicans. Yes. One, identify the problem and look at it honestly and factually and economically, as it has not been discussed either in the halls of government or the newspaper. The second is, okay, here's the problem, what do we do? Here's my alternative situation. You know, because it was a graduate from Grassroots, my budget director, we've had alternative budgets for the last several years. We put them up online. We are billions of dollars less than the state operating budget, and they go in a different direction. Now, the majority party has chosen not to go that way, but any individual can find it. We printed it, we put it online, we talk about it publicly, and that's what you have to do. It's not enough just to say no or to say stop. You have to say stop, okay, which way are you going to go after this?
So, in other words, the first function you perform is to cry out that the emperor has no clothes.
Correct.
And then you offer a wardrobe to fit him.
Correct. It's a good way of putting it, yes.
And
Hawaiian wardrobe at that.
Now, are there allies outside of your political party who come alongside with some of these observations and solutions?
Yeah, but not enough.
Okay.
And if you want to get something done, particularly if there's 1 of you or 3 of you or 5, I'm not worried about the numbers. Like I said at the beginning, I know why I'm down there. I'm down at the legislature to represent the 48% of the people that voted that didn't get a candidate, didn't get a change or anything like that. I'm down there. But the other part of it is, you have to be willing to be consistent and to stay the course. You have to do it with a little bit of humor, because if you took everything seriously, your head would explode.
There you go.
And it'd be toxic material all over the
And you're one of the most fun people to be with, even in the midst of great
I
stress
enjoy
and
it,
pressure.
which drives some of my colleagues crazy. I do.
Absolutely. We've been talking with Senator Sam Slom about what the conservative point of view is in comparison to the dominant thinking here in the state of Hawaii. Having done that, we can now get to the fun part. When we return from this short break, Sam Slom will give his take on this political season, what happened and what didn't happen in the 2014 Hawaii elections. Don't go away. You're watching Ehana Kako on the ThinkTech Hawaii Broadcast Network. Aloha.
This is Alice Lee Hagan, host of ThinkTech Hawaii Business Education Spotlight. My show here at ThinkTech Hawaii is every Thursday from 3 to 4 in the afternoon. I bring in interesting guests from Hawaii the mainland, and hopefully international guests in the future. Do join us on Thursday from 3 to 4 p.m. ThinkTech Hawaii Business Education Spotlight. Aloha.
Welcome back to Ehana Kako on the ThinkTech Hawaii Broadcast Network. I'm Keli'i Akina, president of the Grassroots Institute. We wouldn't be here on this network were it not for my friend Jay Fidel, our producer and grand poobah of everything that happens, and the tremendous staff who work here at ThinkTech Hawaii. We hope that you'll take a look at the entire body of content. We're producing about 25 hours of content every week, and it goes online at www.thinktechhawaii.com. It's also broadcast through various venues as well as sent out in our newsletters. So back to Senator Sam Slom and his take on the 2014 Hawaii elections.
Yeah, let me do that, but you know, one of the questions you had asked me just previously was, do we have allies outside, or are there other things? Well, just a program like this is important because it exposes people to a different view. You don't get different views in the monopoly star advertiser. They have an agenda which they pursue. They choose who will appear in their paper, and you know, whether they look like a fool or they give them, you know, tons of ink, and then they go out and then they endorse the very people that they support. They undermine the other people that have different ideas.
Well, you'll be pleased to know that our viewing audience here is very diverse, and you probably don't see most of our viewers at your Republican rallies.
Yeah, well, that's true. That's true.
So what happened this year? What's the big story of the 2014 elections? I know nationally there was a tidal wave for the Republican Party. People are dancing and singing.
They are dancing. I mean,
they're
look,
in the streets.
Look what happened. Okay, Republicans take the Senate. They have the biggest majority now in the House that they've had, you know, since the 1950s. They took governorships from the bluest of blue states, Massachusetts, Illinois. Why? Well, because even though, and I criticize my party nationally, I think their strategy was basically mostly rope-a-dope. They would sit on the sidelines and let the people beat up the Democrats, and let the Democrats come up with the asinine statements. Oh, Republicans have a war on women, or they hate children, they hate the poor, they hate people of color, blah, 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 blah. People finally get wise to that. You can do that once, maybe twice. But if that's all you've got, were they telling about how wonderful their program has been for the last 6 years?
Well, then you obviously believe that there's a lot more work the Republicans have to do in the next 2 and next 4 years. So that tidal wave swept across the continent, and it stopped.
It stopped.
Yeah, stopped at the Hawaiian archipelago.
Yeah.
So what happened here in Hawaii in this massive defeat for Republicans?
Yeah, a couple things. And it was a massive defeat, even though, again, we had such an atrocious low turnout. And you know, I've got people talking to me all the time, oh, my vote doesn't count. Well, that's a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you don't vote, it doesn't count. You look at some of the closeness of some of the races there. In my area, for the council member to succeed Stanley Chang, it was 47 votes that separated Tommy Waters and Trevor Ozawa. 47 votes. That's it. Does your vote count? You bet it does. Here's the problem. The top 2 Republican candidates, were they Republicans? You could never tell that by any of their advertising or printed materials. They never once called themselves Republican. They never once had the word Republican there. They didn't even have the little R. We learned that our candidate for governor, Duke Iona, very nice man, very qualified, was basically running as being a grandfather. And Charles DeJoux was running both as a centrist, which he put in his material, and as a moderate. Neither one of them ever called themselves Republicans. The only time you knew that they actually were Republicans when the hit pieces came out against both of them. First against Duke, the abortion rights groups.
And those hit pieces called them Republicans.
Absolutely. It put right up in the front, Republican, you know.
And linked them to a Republican platform.
Exactly, which was wrong, and many of us kept asking Duke Iona and Charles also, when you put things seriously against somebody, you've got to answer that, and he didn't do it. Both on the abortion thing, he had stated his position on abortion, but what they said was, and they added all these other things, they weren't true, and they got some people that I know that were Republican conservatives, women, and they said, well, if he doesn't believe in this and he's opposed to this, I'm going to vote for somebody else. And they did.
So you're saying that as you observed the campaign,
Yeah.
there was no response, let alone
there was no
credible
response.
no response
No.
by the Iona
came
campaign
they
to
came
the
after
abortion.
Well, it was abortion number one,
Mhm.
furloughs number two.
For Furlough Fridays.
And everybody knew that those issues were going to come up. Furlough Fridays, Duke had nothing to do with, and it was the governor, and actually it was the governor getting fooled by the HSTA and lied to and all that. But instead of saying that things, they remained silent. And my gosh, he had 50 commercials a day on every TV station, every day.
Are you suggesting that were it not for this strategic error, and in one newspaper you call that of massive proportions,
Yeah.
If it were not for that error, that the odds of winning would have been better for Iona?
The odds would have been better, but I still don't think
Okay.
he would have won. And the reason for that, again, several things. You got to stand for something. You have to define yourself. If you don't define yourself, or if you don't define Grassroots Institute, and somebody else does and says it's this wacko right-wing extremist, weirded out, and if that's all people hear,
true, folks. That's not true.
yeah,
But anyway,
it's not
go
true.
ahead.
But if people hear that
Right.
all the time,
See, I responded,
you
even
did.
to Sam Slom.
You did, and you have to. You don't have to, and you can't respond to everything, and that's fine. But key core issues, because people do like fighters. They don't like people fighting, but they do like people that are willing to stand up and say, "Wait a minute, that's not true. Let's keep this on a higher level."
So do you think he would have done better if he had carried the R label and defined it and put it out there
defined it? I do, yes.
Otherwise, he let others define the R label.
And like I said, I mean, all the people that don't like Republicans, and it's a large number here, including all of the media, they throw out these cliches all the time. If you believe that, you would believe that the Republicans are the ones that have all the money, and the poor Democrats, they've got their little hat out and they're asking for money. The Democrats, locally and nationally, have far more money and put far more money. They always talk about the Koch brothers on the mainland. Yeah, okay, after you talk about the Koch brothers, then what? But the Democrats, I can give you a list, 20 fingers long, about all of the people there and all of the money. And then we got all the celebrities and the sports stars and the people that get other people's attention. You have to, if you're going to run as a Republican, then why would you be ashamed of it? Or why would you be afraid to explain it unless either you can't or you're afraid that itself is a hot button issue. Even saying that though, Keli'i, I looked at the analytics afterwards.
Yes.
Duke did not win one district from mid-Oahu to a stronghold in East Honolulu. He lost every one of them. And I talked to people.
In East Honolulu, that's
lost them all.
Republican territory.
That's Charles is one of the few areas that Charles won outright. But Duke didn't, and because I heard people say, what is it that he stands for? And then he got himself into trouble on the same-sex marriage issue. The Democrats and others were already painting him and his running mate, Mr. Ahu, as, they're religious and they're anti-this and they're anti-that. And he made that statement gratuitously early in the campaign. Well, because of the law and because I conduct marriages, I officiate, I would have to marry homosexual couples. Nobody had asked him about that. He offered that himself, and I can tell you that had a negative effect for people that were saying, we're looking for people. I voted against same-sex marriage. I have nothing against anybody's lifestyle.
You voted against the law.
I voted against the law, but now it's the law, and I uphold the law. I don't vote against people's lifestyle unless they come to force me, financially and otherwise, to support their lifestyle, whatever it is. Has nothing to do with, being gay or same-sex per se. But we're seeing this all the time, and we're seeing people afraid to stand up and speak out. So could he have actually won? He should have won. When we started out, and David Ige was still an unknown quantity, he should have. But what did the Democrats do? Boy, you got to give them credit, Keli'i. At the end, they all hold hands. Even the Abercrombie people came out and were supporting Ige. And from the top of the ticket, which is really the strength, if you don't have somebody good at the top of the ticket, people are likely to go just straight down, and apparently that's what they did. And it's sad. We had very good candidates. We had a good candidate for OHA at large.
Thank you.
It's not how hard you work. It's not even the money, or your ideas, how smart you are. We have a situation here where people have believed it's the Democrats that deliver. It's the Democrats that can get you jobs.
Well, we do live in a Democrat state. In fact, by the way, my race was nonpartisan. It wasn't Republican.
Well, I know,
then you came out and endorsed me, and I thought of
that's
sending
probably
you,
the
I thought of
kiss
sending
of
a
death.
note. Right, gee, Sam, thanks. I might have won this thing.
Yeah, right.
But what would you say now, and we've just got about 5 minutes left, in terms of prospects for the conservative and or Republican movement here in Hawaii and what we should be doing?
Sure. Prospects are excellent if we take them. If we have people that are willing to stand up, unafraid, and know and say what they believe in. Duke Iona had several different plans, but got lost in all the chatter and everything else. His Hope plan, for college and all, for housing, and then his college plan, things like that. He had different ideas, but they were too little too late, in my humble opinion. We've got 2 years before the next election, but the next election's already begun. The people that have a 2-year term for the House, they're already campaigning. We're already being asked, well, who do you like for president? Brian Schatz won the remaining 2 years of Dan Inouye's term, so that's going to be up again. So there's Colleen Hanabusa and others that are thinking about that. Tulsi Gabbard, maybe she'll decide to move up from House. And the problem is we don't get involved in the issues which are going to envelop us, and we have to do that. And to my way of thinking, the people that get out in front of it, that have ideas, that talk to people, don't talk down to them, but they talk to people and offer reasonable and rational alternatives, will have an opportunity.
You don't need to give names now, but do you see an inventory of solid candidates on from the Republicans for the top offices?
Yeah, I do. But remember, this time the Republicans only fielded 1/3 of the available seats, and that's part of the reason. If somebody can't come out, if there's no competition whatsoever, then you have to help. The party has to help the candidates.
And in this election, the Republican candidates came out fairly late, within 3 months in one case
you can't
of
do
the
that.
actual filing deadline.
And some of them were excellent, and some of them, good for them. They didn't get burned out. They didn't get jaundiced eye. They said, I know what I'll do better the next time. Great. And if they start right now, and I mean, people like me are more than willing to help mentor them or to help them in any way.
The faith community was very engaged, at least in terms of numbers of people who went to the Capitol on SB1.
In November of 2013.
That's right. And then many of them got involved on particular campaigns, but something just didn't deliver.
They didn't show up.
That's the analysis.
They didn't show up. And yeah, well,
the low voter turnout across the state applies also to the faith community.
It did. And you have to get involved and stay involved. And it's not easy. But hey, look, it's part of your citizenship. It's part of your both responsibility and obligation. We spend more on video games, more time and more effort than we do in governance. We need to do better. I'm optimistic. I will still speak out, but I want us to make changes.
Quickly, what do Republicans as a party need to do, and what do individual candidates need to do in the next year or 2 years
If we really believe in two parties, and we're going to have an alternative party, then we've got to do a better job of branding and communicating our ideas, and people standing up and not being afraid to put that R after their name.
So instead of running away from the distinctive, from the label,
yes, it's a good way of putting it.
Wear it and define it. Be
Absolutely.
Proactive about what it stands for. Like you were earlier. You're the guy who stands for putting strong women into office.
I love strong women in office, you're right. But no, I mean, with the millennials now, the millennials are not really engaged in politics. Oh yeah, they got really excited in 2008 with Mr. Obama and the social media, but they stayed home in 2012, 14. They are not party people, and the parties are going to continue to lose overall clout. But as long as we have them, as long as we want them, then the parties have to help candidates. They got to find candidates, and they've got to stand for things and back up the people that are out there in the front line.
30 seconds to the people of Hawaii. Look at that camera over there.
Okay. Yeah, that camera over there.
Yes. Tell the people of Hawaii something in 25 seconds.
We can do better. Hawaii deserves better. People say, you get the government you deserve. No, 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 we don't deserve this. And you know that's true. But you don't have to be afraid. We can make this a better place. We've got wonderful people here. We still have plenty of resources and ideas. We have to encourage that and more openness than we have now.
Thank you, Senator Sam Slom.
Thank you, Keli'i. My pleasure. Aloha.
This is Keli'i Akina, president of the Grassroots Institute, interviewing Senator Sam Slom. I hope you learned as much as I did today. What a great opportunity to get into the mind of somebody who's observed and been there with the rise of power of the Democratic Party here in Hawaii and has stood his ground as an opposition voice. We'll be back again next week on Ehana Kako on the ThinkTech Hawaii Broadcast Network. Aloha.